All right, so let's start with the big story that we are tracking on WION at this hour. The pressure continues to mount on the state of Israel to stop its bruising ground offensive on Rafah and allow for the much-needed humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip, where the Palestinians at this moment are starving. The Palestinian Authority has said that the death toll in the besieged Gaza Strip is now near the 32,000 mark. This at a time when the United States still continues to arm Israel, even though there is a humanitarian catastrophe in the Gaza Strip. In the latest, the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken arrived in Cairo for talks with the Arab officials to push for a ceasefire in Gaza and also to secure the release of hostages. He met with the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and the Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry. Blinken said that the United States had in fact drafted a resolution at the United Nations to that effect. Now, Israel insists that despite the humanitarian catastrophe that is being witnessed in the Gaza Strip, it will still press ahead with its bruising ground offensive in Rafah, where an estimated 1.5 million Palestinians have sought a refuge. Israel says that it is in Rafah that it can in fact eliminate Hamas. And this appears on the face of it to have created a rift between the United States and Netanyahu's government. So apart from agreeing to send a delegation of intelligence and military officials to Washington to hear a different approach.
Well, you know, we've been very clear. President Biden's been very clear that we cannot support a major ground operation, military operation in Rafah. There are, as you know, 1.4 million or so civilians in Rafah, many of them displaced from other parts of Gaza. There's no effective way of getting them out of the way into safety, and even the people that would remain in Rafah would be in terrible jeopardy.
Now, the big question, of course, continues to remain, even though the state of Israel has relied mostly on American arms and technology in this war, can there be legal consequences for the United States under international law? Now, there are many countries that have actually suspended their arms exports to the state of Israel because of this bruising offensive that Israel has carried out in the Gaza Strip, in which over 32,000 Palestinians have been killed. Now, the biggest contributor of weapons to the state of Israel remains the United States of America. Now, America's annual contribution of about $3.8 billion to Israel's military budget has continued since the onset of the war on the 7th of October. And according to the Stockholm Institute for Peace, the United States provides at least 69% of Israeli arms imports. The U.S. military also stockpiles weapons on the ground in Israel, presumably for use by the U.S. Army itself. However, the U.S. has allowed Israel to make use of some of these supplies in this war. All right, now to give us more perspective in terms of what, of course, is happening at this moment, we're being joined by Dr. Anner Cohen, who is a professor of non-proliferation and terrorism studies at the Milbury Institute. He's joining us live from Monterey in California. Now, Professor Cohen, this is something that is being talked about a lot. There appears to be a growing rift between the Biden administration and the Netanyahu government in Tel Aviv. Now, the Biden administration says that it has been telling Israel that it should be very circumspect and should not invade into Rafah. Joe Biden has in fact described that as a red line for the Israelis. What is your take on this apparent rift which appears to be ongoing between Washington and Tel Aviv? Because despite calling the invasion of Rafah a red line, the United States still insists that it will not stop the supply of arms to Israel.
Well, Israel, the United States has moved more and more towards, if not more and more using actually the supply of munitions and weapons to Israel as a leverage in terms of Israeli policy in Gaza. Israel signaling the importance of Rafah. I think much of it is for the negotiation with the over the hostages through the mediators. And my own sense is that it's possible that some of it is bluff. Israel is not ready to move into Rafah right now, militarily speaking. It doesn't have the enough forces. actually does not working to bring those forces, and it is very unlikely it will happen during the Ramadan. So much of it is about the credibility of the Netanyahus and about indeed the relationship between Israel and the United States. And indeed, much of it is also about the lack of confidence in Netanyahu himself. There is a growing sense in the United States and elsewhere that Netanyahu prolongs the war, not moving as fast as possible towards finalizing a deal on the hostages for his own political purposes, for his own political survival.
Right.
And that lack of confidence, I think, is big part of this growing rift between the United States and Israel.
Right. Now, we've also heard the comments that were made by Chuck Schumer very recently. We've also heard what Bernie Sanders has been repeatedly saying, that Israel would not have been able to wreak this kind of violence on the Gaza Strip without the transfer of weapons by the United States. And he's in fact gone on to state that the United States is complicit in what the state of Israel is doing for the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. How do you think this war has actually damaged the US-Israeli relationship?
Well, the last few weeks has damaged quite significantly. The fact that the United States demanded an Israeli delegation, I understand, headed by the Israeli Minister of Defense to Washington to get some clarifications, some other people would say orders about what Israel can and cannot do, is obviously infringe on Israeli sovereignty. Netanyahu, for his own base, talks about absolute victory and about the need to go to Rafah, but it's all talk. I believe that under the current circumstances, Israel is looking for a way to reach some kind of understanding about very limited operation in the Rafah area without moving a significant amount of refugees. Essentially, the United States signaled to Israel it would be unacceptable,
right?
And Israel is very much dependent on American weapons, no doubt.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Anner Cohen, for joining us and getting us that perspective there. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.